Now you're welcome along. We have loads to discuss, loads going on. So the Women's Six Nations gets underway this weekend. Ireland against Wales at the RDS on Saturday. That's a 4:45 kickoff. We have the URC returning, including Connacht against Leinster Saturday 7:35, a precursor to their Heineken Champions Cup game. Munster have Benetton on the Friday 7:35. Ulster, interestingly, go down to the Stormers on the Saturday. The South African sides of late are winning their home games and creeping up the table. And then, of course, there is a men's championship in the rearview mirror. France Grand Slam winners, Ireland second, Triple Crown to boot. Irish under-20s with a Grand Slam win themselves. That was at Musgrave Park. And the Italians winning for the first time since 2015. So, like I said, loads going on. Andy Dunne in studio. Hello.
How are you, Joe?
Very well. Keith Wood is with us. Hello.
How are you doing, Joe? Hi, Andy.
How are you, Woody?
So let's jump in. Let's get your general thoughts on the Six Nations just gone, which wrapped up at the weekend. Andy Dunne, who is your Irish player of the tournament and who's your player of the tournament?
Probably lean towards Gibson Park for Ireland, because I think him or Furlong, in terms of the overall influence that they have, the overall impact their style of play brings to the team performance. I have to pick one, I suppose. I'll go with Gibson Park. Player of the tournament, DuPont. Boring.
Cheap and
Boring
cheerful.
Yeah, cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
Quick snack version there. But yeah, I think actually he wasn't probably at his absolute best, but he's, again, key moments, delivering in key moments. I think he is a figurehead for them.
Yes.
They look towards him to launch most of their creative play, and he's a bit of a beast in defence and work rate as well. So overall, yeah, I'll go with him. Yeah.
Okay.
Cheap and cheerful, like you said.
Oh, it's fine. Keith?
Hugo Keenan, I think at 15. I just thought he consistently played very well from Ireland, and I would go with Gregory Aldred from France. Every time I see him play, the amount of work he gets through, a lot of it seen, a lot of it unseen, but his impact pretty much every time he's involved, with or without the ball, seems to have an impact.
Yeah.
I thought DuPont was fantastic, and actually his ability to make big moments in games is fairly unparalleled in World Rugby at the moment, but it took him a while to get going, I thought. And it was a really interesting Six Nations. It started with a bang and then kind of tailed off as it became more serious as the competition went on. But it was, I liked it, but I went to the last two games and I was kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say jaded by it, but there wasn't huge fun or atmosphere in either in Twickenham or in the Aviva for the last one. So I thought it kind of trailed off a little.
Why do you think that was on Saturday?
I don't know. I mean, it was funny. I got there early. I don't go to a huge amount of international matches, and I kind of went to that one because my wife is Scottish, so I thought the two of us could fight with each other at a match, which was kind of fun. And I got there too early, which was fine. I got a chance to chat to a lot of fans, which was really nice, and I was sitting in the past players area, so I had Eric Miller beside me. That was pretty cool. Mick Kiernan sitting in front of me, Terry Kingston over from me. So it was great kind of catching up with those guys and catching up with some of the supporters, which was lovely. It just didn't seem to kick off. There wasn't any crackle in the air. There was no real excitement, and I think I was interested. I'm really interested in how we're playing, and I know I want to have a bit of a scrap with Andy over it, because we can see where we're going with elements of it. But we're trying an awful lot. We're not going forward a huge amount at times. We're trying a huge amount, but we looked to be unbelievably comfortable. And it would have been interesting if Stuart Hogg had made that pass, which was just a dreadful decision not to pass inside, because that may have put us under a bit of pressure. But that was the only time in the whole game where we looked like we were under any level of pressure. So I think that's palpable to fans as well. And look, people talk about whether it's overly corporate or that the prices are gone too expensive. I think they all feed into that as well. But also what happens on the field, we looked like we were in third gear for the whole game, and I think the crowd feeds off that.
Yes, true. And then there was the distinct possibility France were just going to make the whole thing irrelevant anyway that evening in Paris. Where are you in Ireland then? Last time we spoke was a couple of weeks ago. You were very happy.
Yeah, I would. Overall, I think we're in rude health. If you're breaking down the key areas of concern or the areas we need to improve, I would say the two standout areas are what is our approach around the scrum, and then what would we, our one-up tackles or one-to-one tackles versus our defence. I actually think our defensive system looks pretty lethal. Like, the line speed is better than most. It is better than the other teams. We're coming off the line, we're putting huge pressure on teams, but we're missing some key first up tackles. I don't think that's a huge problem to fix. I think it's a little bit of tackle technique and a little bit of perhaps not the same level of aggression. Line speed going from 100% aggression to 95% is a small shift if it makes you technically better in the tackle or positioning yourself better in the tackle. We were missing on average, we were getting about 90% of our tackles. We did, I think against France, 84% of our tackles. We missed 16% of our tackles. That's a little high. 10% of all your tackles, if you're making 100 tackles in a game, is about right for international level, and obviously you don't want those 10 misses to be key ones. But yeah, overall, a good defensive system with need for tweaking the tackle technique and the first up misses, and I think that would make us really quite significantly stronger. The scrum, I would love to see us manage that, like, politically and shrewdly, with how we butter up referees, what we put out into the public about how we're going to scrummage. I think it's a constant game of to and fro with scrummaging. Woody will tell you before every single international or every single game, the ref will come in and have a chat with the front five. He'll also have chatted to the coaches. I think these days they're getting access to the teams in the lead up to games. There's a lot of pitter-patter and communication going on, but I think if we were to put out there that we're going to have this policy of, I would call it containment in your scrum, as opposed to being destructive in your scrum, I think a lot of refs would lean towards that and say, that's an easier day for me. If the team are going to look to hold their own, absorb impact, stay square when it's their ball or the opposition ball, and they get that message out and that narrative among referees. A lot of international scrums in the top 4 or 5 teams in the world are looking to be destructive, and I think on our day we can be, but it makes for this chaotic scrum scenario. Everyone's trying to get the upper hand. This policy of containment by absorbing hits is, to me, is a really interesting one. It's a bit different to what we've done, and I think if we can make that a stable part of our game, you know, we're pretty formidable, because the rest of our game looks really good.
Where have you plucked this policy of containment from?
In truth, I've plucked it from Eastern philosophy. No, I know when we trained in Bath years and years ago, we had a judo trainer, and it was really interesting about talking about impact on tackles. And he said, if you actually go in and try and absolutely hammer someone in a tackle, you'll often get the timing wrong. You know, it's like shanking a golf ball and you just feel it reverberates up through every part of your body. When you're really in a flow in terms of making physical impact, you don't even feel the tackle. And this judo coach had me thinking all kinds of stuff back in 2006, but I met a guy called Jan Golden, who's in charge of Tai Chi Ireland. I think he's done a bit of work with Caelan Doris, and he talks about absorption of impact versus the school of thought. It's very, you know, bulk up, get stronger, win collisions, win impacts, go into a scrum, win the first hit. He talks about, even in just observational terms, absorbing impact through, as it dissipates down through the front row, second row, back row. He talks about, is it possible for the back row players to keep their heels on the ground, which would be completely different to the way things are coached. But I think we've got to look at it maybe from a left field point of view and say, is there a way we can get an upper hand in scrummaging? And we may get the upper hand by simply containment and getting the refs on side, getting the players in the position where we can attack from a stable ball, stable platform, versus 3 collapses. Maybe we get a favourable wheel up, maybe we don't. I think you would win over a lot of referees as well.
Keith?
Yeah, it's an interesting philosophical
bit of Eastern philosophy, Woody. I thought
it's interesting to have a journey to look at things differently. I never kick anything out because it's different thinking, and I can go back to the days where there's nobody would ever take a backward step. There's a couple of difficulties with it. I think there's a place for it, but I don't know. It's funny because I haven't heard it, so I'm trying to mull through it at the present moment in time. I can give you an example. Claw, at one stage, when he moved over to loosehead, would absolutely hang me out to dry, and he would just go on the outside of the tight head and push him in on top of me. And Claw's job was to get up his side of the scrum, which he did perfectly. Now, he killed me doing it, but he was right in many respects to say, well, I have my side of the scrum up, and it hadn't taken any energy for him. He was just pushing your man in on top of me. And it was a way of thinking his way through it, because he wasn't a natural loosehead, and he'd move from tight head over there. And actually, he'd get killed if he got himself into a perfect position. So he manoeuvred it to do his job, which was to get his side of the scrum up. I used to slag him about that for a long time, and it was a way of using the tight head's strength against him. And we would have always done that. And actually, back in the Lions in '97, we used their weight against them. It was their responsibility to stay up. They were bigger than we were, so we used to bring them down a bit lower. So we'd use their weight against them. So, I mean, the philosophy stands that you need to do different things differently. The difficulty I have with it, Renal is an awkward referee. He also is very French in the French aspect of reffing, which is if a team is going forward, they're obviously doing it right and they penalise the team that isn't. I would be far more interested in look, I think we had a young hooker in the team, and I think Tyg Furlong, I think he got it wrong. Now, they say the referee apologised afterwards. That's fine. Only he needs to take control of that during the game. You can't be waiting for an apology afterwards. You need to deal with it, and he didn't. So that's a lesson that'll be learned. The hit isn't there as much. It isn't there. You have to ease your way into the scrum. I would like to be able to take it very well. The issue for us to be destructive is I don't think we have the large enough second rows to be destructive. If you look at Antonio in France, he doesn't make any hit. He just gets himself into an unbelievable position at 145 kilos. And then you have Willems, who's probably 135 kilos behind him. Nobody's moving those guys. And you're not moving them. So there's no point attacking that. You need to be able to contain it, but get yourself in a position where you can strike the ball and get it to the number 8 feet quicker. And that's the one thing I would say on our ball. We need to work on our strike to have a clearer channel to get it straight to number 8 feet. But I don't think we can ever let ourselves be in a position where we let the referee get hoodwinked, which I think he was against England.
And Keith, one more point. What about Andy's thoughts on buttering up the referee, on the public messaging around games?
But you do that all the time, and you have to be able to talk to the referee. There's ways to talk to them, and you need to have a rapport with the referee to say, listen, if you don't mind, ref, he's going on the outside. I'm just going to go straight. That's it. And if he's going on the outside, it's he's walking, I'm not walking. And you keep repeating that but some of the refs just don't take that very well. And if that is the case, you need to be able to do something more about it. But there is a total dialogue. There has to be. And look, I would always try and butter up the referees all the time. And you're trying not to bitch at the referee. and that's really hard when you're under pressure, when you've given away a penalty under the post and you know it's going to be 3 points and you're unbelievably frustrated. You still need to be able to try and to say to the ref, I think you got that one wrong, ref. And this is why it's wrong, without, getting on top of him and giving out to him in front of 80,000 people and 7 or 8 million on the telly. I mean, it's a pressure situation for referees. It's much easier for a ref to give a penalty to the team going forward.
I think
that's the only thing that flies in Andy's Eastern philosophy.
I think there's a parallel I would often.
There's a parallel universe for this conversation.
Yes, it's been lovely so far. But the Gareth Southgate approach in the 2018 World Cup with the media, the English media in particular, like vultures, was to open the doors and let them in and play darts with Raheem Sterling and so on and so forth. And come what may, they came third place in the World Cup. They did relatively successful World Cup, but still didn't win anything. And they weren't hung out to dry like every other English footballing team at a major tournament. It's because people are human beings, and they started to realise, I understand what Gareth's trying to achieve with his team. I understand that this lad here is vulnerable and he has, an X, Y and Z, and it's just human nature. If you invite the referees in some kind of accommodating way or fashion and say, we want to play a certain type of rugby that allows the game to flow, that doesn't put, you can intimate it's not going to put you under extreme pressure in a game. If we just have this policy of containment, everyone wins. Everyone gets an easier life, except the opposition, who have the bigger people like Antonio and Valemsa, who have the capacity to be destructive. So we can, in a way, we can disarm that by sneaky means, and hence the Eastern approach.
On the point you made about the Irish defence then, and the tackling more so than the defensive system, Ireland conceded just 4 tries in this championship and were very defensively sound. That's the best record of any team in the competition. Is there any trend to what you're seeing in the Irish tackle technique? Because you mentioned technique a few times.
Okay, generally I think you have to qualify it, like you said. We conceded the least amount of tries. It's not a major issue, but big tournament games, knockout stages, we missed a couple of crucial tackles. I think they either came from, and there were a lot of these were in the outside backs from 12 out to the wings, where you race up in order to close down their space, and then you suddenly stop. And your 16 studs are in the turf. You lose. You've suddenly lost that position. You're not in a dominant position. What I'm suggesting is, but the line speed has been super feature in our defence, but it's a trade-off. You come up that speed, you either continue without breaking and you're really exposed if someone shifts either side of the defender, or you dial it back down from 5th gear to 4.5th gear, and you're 4th gear perhaps. You're still travelling, you've still got good line speed, but you're in control of your own agility. Get yourself in a better position to make tackles. And in the wider channels, that happened maybe 4, 5, 6 occasions in the first hour against France, which ultimately decided the championship.
Okay. Keith, somebody was in touch wondering if Dan Sheehan, given our strength and depth at hooker, Dan Sheehan could move across, say, to loose head prop, for instance, or tight head prop at some stage in his career.
No. And I think Dan Sheehan, I'm looking at Dan Sheehan, and but I was really interested when Ronan Kelleher came on the scene, and I said, God, isn't that he's a different type from what we've had, where he's a ball carrying, running hooker, and I'm a big fan of having ball carriers in each row of the scrum. You need to have them. It just makes the life an awful lot easier. It seems a little bit more natural if you've one in each row, even if you've 2 in each row, if you can at different times. That's fantastic. So I thought it was great when he came along. Then I watched Sheehan coming up afterwards, kind of looking slightly more agricultural, socks down, a bit unkempt. The change that he's had in the period of time that he has played rugby has been pretty phenomenal. I'm looking forward to the reaction that Kelleher has when he comes back. But I can tell you that Sheehan has leapfrogged him at this stage. His standard of play, his impact on the game has been pretty fantastic. I think he's throwing very well as well. He looks leaner than he was, and that's because he's playing an awful lot of matches. You know, you're not quite doing as much. He's going to get an awful lot bigger. Stop tinkering with people's positions. Every time I hear a coach doing that, I get annoyed with them. There's guys that play in a position that are good in that position. We could end up with two unbelievable international standard hookers, and we need them.
Okay.
And we'd like more pushing behind that. They play in that position. To move from hooker to it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Okay.
But also, I think he doesn't have the shape for it. I think he's a big man, but he is not like, he's not Tyg Furlong, giant man, So
yeah.
No, let's just knock that in the head.
Perfect.
Pretty quick.
Done. Let's come back to tempo then for a moment, Andy, because you mentioned Jameson Gibson Park, potentially your Irish player of the tournament, and that's about tempo. So Irish tempo is something we've talked to you about for a number of years at this stage. So expand on all that for us. Are you liking this flat out tempo for 80 minutes straight?
I'm preferring it to the turgid kind of slow, regurgitating possession, 140 rucks style that actually won us the Grand Slam in 2018. And but it's when you play that type of game that we're currently playing, it is exhilarating to play. It's exhilarating to watch. I think everyone would agree that this Irish team are brilliant to watch. They're entertaining. And the challenge is when you are playing like the first 10 minutes against England, allowing for that red card after, a minute and a half. Our style of play was exceptional for that 10 minutes, and it had nothing to do with England being down to 14 men. There's no way we had the time to adapt our strategy. We just kept doing what we were doing and see where we were. I think 8 players touched the ball as a first receiver in that first 10 minutes. It's incredible to watch, and it's like I said, exhilarating to be a part of. The challenge with it is it's like a drug, and you start to want. We got a sense that England were in all kinds of trouble, so you want to just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And that's actually slightly the problem with it. If we can, I often use my beloved Liverpool as an analogy, but someone like Thiago comes on in midfield and puts his foot on the ball. I had a coach in Harlequins that Woody will remember well, Tommy Turner, who was a really, really eccentric, brilliantly skillful Welsh out half, played in the 80s. And he's the first person who introduced me to that line. Who's putting their foot on the ball, and I actually didn't know what he meant. I was like, what are you talking about? It's the ability to come in and take the edge off things, hold a little bit of possession and calm things down. In that England game, we could have been less exciting and tidied up the game a lot earlier, and with 20 to go that game was in the balance. You hold possession, you're not as exhilarating, you're not constantly a threat. Sexton's not constantly a threat, Furlong's not constantly a threat. You're not constantly trying to make the difficult offload. As admirable as that is, in certain situations it's good to have 2 styles of play, or 3, but typically all this style of play requires is someone, or 2 players, or 3 senior pros, to put their foot on the ball and say slow it down. And interestingly, I know I've been critical of Conor Murray and his box kicks over the years. In the last 10-15 minutes against England, that's precisely what he did. He showed his 90 caps worth of experience, and when we were frantic and exciting, he actually dumbed it down a bit, and it worked perfectly when Gibson Park went off. So
it's very interesting you mention that, because Brian O'Driscoll was in that very seat in advance of the England game, and I was wondering, and we chatted about it with Keith and Stuart Barnes as well that week, if Murray off the bench was right for this team anymore, because generally we've had tempo off the bench and this team plays with tempo, and in Murray off the bench, especially if we're behind, more so, than if we're ahead. Is that really what you want off the bench? Now, as it happened against England, it was just what this team needed off the bench. Now, the problem for Andy Farrell or anybody else is you don't quite know what you're going to need off the bench until the game has started. But I do take your point about a change of tempo, certainly at Twickenham.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's a huge positive in our game. And you can only get better at playing this kind of exhilarating rugby by doing it under pressure. And I've often used the RGs as an example in the lead up to the 4 years lead up to the 2015 World Cup. They played this ridiculous style and they lost 78-12 to South Africa in Durban, but they kept at it, and eventually they beat South Africa 3 months before the World Cup, and then they went out and hammered us playing the same way. You need to do it under pressure, so this is the perfect way to do it in the Six Nations, but we'd be nice to be able to have people who can put their foot on the ball too.
No, I hear you. Keith, we're in the teenage years with this new style, and we're going to get a bit better in our 20s. Yeah,
look, it's funny. I love it. I think it can be a little bit frustrating because it's a bit inaccurate. And actually, when the pressure is on more, strangely, I think our accuracy is better. I think the attention to detail under more pressure is better. Look, I'm interested. You mentioned Paul Turner. So Paul Turner was a Welsh wizard. And if I put three of them together, and this is definitely going back in time, it was Paul Turner, David Pears and Stuart Barnes, who were all very similar types of out halves, which would be they were quite happy to go laterally across the pitch. They were quite laterally to unpick a lock and attack the line. I mean, they all attacked the gain line, and they were pretty much instinctive and thinking tens. Paul was eccentric, but he was brilliant. Your skills improved just by having a conversation with Paul because he just looked at the game slightly differently. That's something I'd like to see us try and move. And I'm happy enough with this. I'm happy with us trying it. I'm watching how it tires players out, the opposition out, because the ball is going everywhere. And especially the teams that were playing laterally in the competition, it tired them out an awful lot. It tired England out a lot. I think we need to attack the line a tiny little bit more, and that's the one thing. So I actually think Johnny has played very well in the competition, but I feel we do need our 10 to take the ball to the game line a little bit more. He is not a threat, and he's not being perceived as being a threat. So when that happens, and you see there's a few passes from Gibson Park and from Conor Murray go to ground because Johnny hasn't run into that place where he should be, and they're passing it and he has stopped, and that's something that we can't afford to have. But we're picking holes in something here, and I'd like just to see him do that a little bit more, and I'd like to see a couple of carries from forwards and from maybe Aki or Henshaw running a really hard line back every now and then just to keep the opposition a little bit honest. And I actually think the style we're playing then will be more effective still. And I do think it's a style that we're trying to get used to, and I think we do need to be able to put our foot on the ball, and we do need to be able to play in different ways. Strangely, I thought it was very comforting when Conor Murray came on the other day, and I've been critical of Conor as well. But it's almost as if he'd found his niche. He was in control of his environment the other day, and it looked very reassuring for the team. So I think it's exciting. I'm kind of excited to see where it gets to. But for that to be the case, I do think we need to have a couple of hard lines, not short pops, but people coming from depth at different times on blind angles, be it, as I say, be it Caelan Doris or maybe Aki at a different time, just to shake things up. And then I think Johnny can attack the line a little bit more. But for me, there's a little bit too much happening too far back. But we're picking holes in it because they haven't looked under pressure. And that's my fear, is when we are put under pressure, what way is it going to be? So, like, I'm looking forward to the summer, because that is the perfect place that we need to go to see how good this style is, how much we can progress it, and what additional work we have to do, because we're not anywhere near the peak And the consistently we're said that we peak at the wrong time, but we haven't peaked. And there's an awful lot of mistakes being made. Quite happy for them to be made now. That we don't make them next year would be great.
Clock is against us. We don't have time to go through all the other teams. Scotland are in a fairly dire place. The Welsh have some major rebuilding to do. For the Italians, what a wonderful, glorious moment. I mean, the defining moment in some respects of the championship. And then France are worthy champions. Everybody's been talking about France for quite some time. Just on England before we sign off on the men's championship. So Eddie Jones, given the full backing of the RFU, this came on the Monday after the weekend. An RFU spokesperson said Sunday night, we're encouraged by the solid progress the team has made during this Six Nations. And this has been met with just ridicule, borderline anger across the English punditry fraternity. Ugo Monye said, fundamentally, that's just dishonest. We've won 2 out of 5, which mirrors last year. Where's the progress? We've scored fewer tries. This is a team that's meant to be progressing in the attacking box. I haven't seen it. Sam Warburton called it an outright lie. So the RFU have thumbs up Daddy, as we all expected they would do. But England in not a very good place. The only thing is in 2018, at this point, they had finished 5th, beaten by Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, would lose 2 matches in South Africa in the summer, and we know how 2019 turned out. So even though everything is pointing towards this is not working and something is running dry here, there is still that massive parallel with 4 years ago.
Yeah, my old, I was laughing, my old roommate, housemate, Ugo Monye, when I was playing in the Harlequins.
We've got to get you two on and have a...
He's a good lad.
The Monye Farrell years, I think, that's the chat.
He, Dunne.
Dunne. I mixed you up with Andy Farrell. Go on.
Happens often.
Sorry.
It does to me. I would say, okay, strong words, lies, damn lies, or it's dishonest. I think, had there not been it sounds a bit ridiculous, had there not been a pandemic, like the RFU lost a massive amount of money, probably of any of the rugby nations, and they employed the most people and they sacked the most people, and Eddie Jones has about 18 months left on a massive contract, and if they want to get rid of him, they've got to pay him, and if they want to bring someone in like Scott Robertson, they got to double pay him, and they're stuck, and they're in a position where they can't afford to get rid of him and bring in a new coach. So they're going to come out and say, we can see positive signs and we're going to give him the backing of the board. And I think it's one of these, in inverted commas, a backing of the board where he's actually got the backing of the board because they can't do anything else. Because I think the deterioration in their style it's too worrying to suggest it's a dip in form. They do look rudderless. I was really excited to see how Marcus Smith would do in the tournament, and given that he's playing in a group that is currently looks this kind of devoid of coherence and clarity in their play, he still did really well. And actually they were looking to a novice with loads of talent to get them out of trouble, and he finished top scorer. If Marcus Smith was playing in a current Irish setup, he would have lit the place on fire. You know what I mean? So England are really, really struggling, I think, and they always have resources, but the resources are less than they were based on a really financially challenging period for them. I think that's probably the key factor in that statement and keeping them on board to the next World Cup. I think it doesn't mean they won't improve, but it's just, to me, it's too worrying, their overall style. They look all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place, Keith.
Yeah, I look at the spokesperson. It's a bullshit comment, really, and that's why everybody's jumped up and down on it. It's been interesting listening to former CEO Francis Byrne talking about it as well, saying you can't just talk about a World Cup because actually it's the Six Nations that pays everybody's wages, and it's the main income generator. So that's something. There seems to be more excuses than resources in England at the moment. Likewise, I wanted to see Marcus Smith play because he's an exciting young talent with a lot of experience, and they pretty much picked as many other players around him that didn't suit him as you possibly could. So I don't understand any of the rationale that Eddie Jones is using at the moment. So I find that quite hard to watch. I don't really mind too much. equally well, England have they have a much easier path in the World Cup next year. And whatever we can say about Eddie Jones, he's able to deliver at that stage far better than Ireland have ever delivered at that stage. But it makes for hard watching different times. For me, when you see young players that are the pressure that's been put on them, but a player comes in and he's dropped within a week, which happened. Blandmeyer came on through one ball, lost it, and he's out of the squad the following week. It's a fairly fragile place to be. I wouldn't like to be in that. Alex Sanderson came out this morning from Sale, and he was incredibly critical of their treatment of Tuilagi during the Six Nations. They said England rushed him back, they didn't manage him properly, and he's been injured because of it. And that was quite interesting as well.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I don't think the level of anger that's there from past players and coaches, and look, everybody has a bit of an agenda or whatever, and maybe they're wanting to get a paper column or whatever it is. But actually, most of them want England to do well. And when someone stands up and said, we're really happy with the progress, you can't be happy with the progress. There isn't progress.
Yeah.
It's 2 wins.
We're talking here with Keith Wood and Andy Dunne. Our rugby coverage and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. We'll park the men's Six Nations and just move to the TikTok women's Six Nations. Then finally, Wales at the RDS Saturday, 4:45 kickoff for Greg McWilliams in his first game as head coach. The general context here, if you've missed the bits and bobs during the week, Nicola Friday announced as captain. Second row, she has 22 caps, been there since 2016. There are 9 uncapped players in the Irish squad. McWilliams confirmed during the week that certainly at certain points in this championship, more so towards the latter end of it, he will be without several players who will be involved in the Canadian leg of the Sevens series. For context, the last time Ireland made do without Sevens players, they were without Bevan Parsons, Stacey Flood, Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe and Eve Higgins. So those kind of players potentially missing for part of the Six Nations. On Saturday coming, they face Wales. This is a Welsh team. They hammered 45-0 away last year, although in the interim they have contracted 12 players full-time and another 12 on semi-pro contracts, and it seems that there were a lot of issues behind the scenes with that Welsh team last year. So we're expecting a better Wales this time around. Obviously, from an Irish point of view, last year was a complete nadir, culminating in missing the World Cup in Parma, losing to Spain and Scotland. Andy, you know Greg McWilliams a little bit. Everything we hear about this guy is very positive. He was involved in the heyday, I suppose, of Irish women's rugby when they reached a World Cup semi-final and won a Grand Slam in 2013. You have a little insight into what he's trying to do and the style of play he's going to try and aim towards.
Yeah, I think he's a brilliant appointment because it is a group. It's had press in the last year and a half that effectively amounts to bad press. There's been pretty ill feeling towards the IRFU in terms of the lack of resources towards Anthony Eddy. There's been, a signed letter from 60 odd players, including former players, and on top of all that level of dissatisfaction that's coming from within the personnel, the standard of play has been awful, and you got to stand up and take that criticism on the chin too and say, well, look, as a viewing public, technically it's not good enough, tactically it's not good enough, and at a certain stage in that journey, players have to take responsibility for low standards also. And I would say what Greg will do is he will give this group very, very, very clear direction on what he wants, and he will bring it into how they're training. An example would be he, I believe, sent an email to every registered AIL player back in December with like a memo of how he wants to play with this Irish team and what is required of you individually to be in consideration for that squad. And one of the key things was that the current international women's game across Six Nations, Tri-Nations and Super Rugby, the ball's in play for about 35 minutes in a game. He wants to get up to 36 minutes, which is rather large in the context of an overall game. And he also wants to very much focus on what is done and you can keep the ball and play for it. If me and you kept the ball for 36 minutes, we'd be walking around the field. It's what you actually do with it. And he's looking to, so he's brought in an S&C coach who's formerly with Munster and Leinster men's team, and he's using all their data to work out the distances they're travelling. They're out in the high performance centre, and how many of, in terms of the overall distance travelled, how many of those are sprints? You look at Mo Salah covers 11 kilometres in a game, but 90% of them plus are sprints. And you've got to train for that, and you've got to train in a different way, and a lot of these players haven't been exposed to that properly. Then you've got to have the skill level and the concentration to maintain it. I think he's looking at selections based on that. So some experienced players have been left out of the squad because he doesn't feel they've got the capacity currently or fitness levels to get into that type of play. That to me is a sea change for the Irish women's setup. They're out in the high performance centre, they're getting access to the resources, but they've got someone who gives them direction and technical expertise now. So it's back onto them, and they got to step up to the plate. I'm really excited about it, actually.
Final word to you, Keith.
Yeah, I think it's been a really tough 9 months for the women's game, and I think the onus is on everybody involved. Actually, is on the players as well. I mean, for the players to write a letter of such vitriol, and for the IRFU to respond poorly first and then laterally better. The responsibility is on all of them then to try and make this work. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed that the Sevens players will be missing. I think there's we need to try and tidy up the season so that we can get our best players on the field for the competitions. And I know that's difficult, but I'm looking forward to it, and it'll be interesting to see. I love that idea of preparation, that you send it out to everybody. So actually, we'd like everybody to be fitter, is what he's asking. We want everybody to push it so that they can be more live during the game. That's a fairly large statement of intent for a group of women that will want to play in an Ireland jersey. So, but it's also a pathway immediately. If you're unbelievably fit and your skills are up to scratch, and you're going to be able to have this game, this all-pace game, that's pretty cool. So, look, it's a simple direction, but I don't know him, and I'd be interested to see how he gets everybody on the one page. And if he does, look, they have a history of performing well. It's just a bad year, and we want to be able to consign that year to history.
Fellas, that was fantastic. Keith Wood, thank you. Andy Dunne, thanks a million.
Cheers, Joe.
Cheers,
Rugby
gents.
on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.